The huge crystal building floated in space above the gas giant called Xerion Prime. Inside this building, 12 different alien species sat in a circle. They were the Galactic Federation Council, and today they would decide if humans could join their group. The building was made of clear crystal that sparkled with blue and green lights. Each alien had their own special chair that fit their body shape. Captain Jake Morrison sat in a chair that was too small for him. His uniform felt tight and uncomfortable. Next to him sat Dr. Lisa Hamilton. She held a tablet computer that contained all the information about human culture and history. They had traveled for 3 months through space to get here. This was their chance to make Earth part of the galaxy's biggest alliance. The leader of the meeting was Ambassador Kethvar. He was tall like a giant insect with 4 arms and big compound eyes. His skin was dark green and shiny. When he spoke, his voice came through machines that turned his words into English. "Human visitors," Kethvar said in a voice that sounded like clicking metal, "we have read your application to join our federation. We have some questions about your species and your culture." Jake stood up straight and tried to look confident. "We're happy to answer any questions you have, Ambassador. Tell us about these stories your people tell, these myths and legends you seem to value so much." Kethvar's big eyes looked at Jake with what seemed like amusement. Lisa stepped forward and touched her tablet. Pictures appeared in the air showing human art and stories. "Our mythology has guided human civilization for thousands of years. These stories teach us about courage, sacrifice, and doing what's right even when it's hard." A blob-like creature that was purple and constantly changing shape started to laugh. This was a Gorvani delegate. When Gorvani laugh, they release chemicals that smell like rotten fruit. The translation machine turned this into words. "Your species worships beings that never existed. Gods with magic hammers. Humans who can lift mountains and fight armies alone. These aren't just entertainment," Jake said firmly. "They're examples of the best that humans can be. They inspire us to be better than we are." Now a crystal being that looked like a walking diamond started to speak. This was Velthar from Andromeda 7. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Your people believe in impossible things. You tell stories about dead people coming back to life. You believe one person can defeat thousands of enemies. You think your leaders can control the weather and split oceans in half?" More aliens began to laugh and make their own versions of laughing sounds. Some clicked, some buzzed, some made noises like breaking glass. The sound filled the crystal chamber and made Jake feel small and embarrassed. Kethvar raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "Your heroes die, and then return from death as if nothing happened. Your warriors fight against odds that no logical being would face. Your ancient leaders supposedly performed miracles that break the laws of physics. How can we trust a species that cannot tell the difference between fantasy and reality?" Dr. Hamilton's face turned red with anger, but she kept her voice calm. "These stories aren't meant to be taken as historical facts. They're metaphors. They teach us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they believe in something bigger than themselves." A slug-like alien with tentacles for arms slithered forward. "But you actually believe these impossible things happened. Your species prays to these fictional characters. You build temples for imaginary gods. This shows a dangerous inability to think clearly." "We don't worship the stories themselves," Jake explained. "We learn from them. When a human reads about David fighting Goliath, they learn that sometimes the smallest person can overcome the biggest problem if they have courage and faith." The laughter got louder. A robot-like being made of metal and wires spoke in a voice like a broken radio. "Faith, courage. These are emotions that cloud judgment. Logic and reason should guide all decisions. Your species is controlled by feelings instead of facts." Kethvar stood up to his full height, which was nearly 8 feet tall. "We have made our decision. The Galactic Federation values logic, reason, and scientific thinking. Your species shows a primitive attachment to supernatural beliefs and impossible stories. Until humans can evolve beyond these childish fantasies, you cannot join our alliance." Jake felt his heart sink. 3 months of travel, years of preparation, and it was over in less than an hour. "Ambassador, please reconsider. These stories made us strong. They taught us to never give up, to help others, to fight for what's right. Exactly the problem, Kethvar replied with what sounded like amusement. You fight instead of negotiate. You take risks instead of calculating safe options. You trust feelings instead of data. These traits make your species dangerous and unpredictable. Lisa tried one more time. Our mythology created the foundation for human law, human rights, and human science. The stories about heroes taught us to protect the weak. The legends about justice gave us legal systems. The myths about exploration led us to the stars. Velthar's crystal body flashed with different colors, which was how his species showed strong emotions. Primitive superstition dressed up as wisdom. Any truly advanced civilization grows beyond the need for imaginary heroes and impossible stories. Security guards that looked like giant beetles approached Jake and Lisa. Kethvar waved his hand in dismissal. Return to your small blue world, humans. Perhaps in a few centuries your species will mature enough to abandon these ridiculous beliefs. When you do, you may apply again. As the guards escorted them toward the exit, Jake and Lisa could hear the aliens behind them sharing human myths and laughing at them. They told each other about humans who supposedly walked on water, lifted impossibly heavy objects, and came back from the dead. Each story brought more laughter and clicking sounds. Did you hear about their god who died and came back to life? One alien said. What about the human who supposedly parted an entire sea so his people could walk through it? Said another. Or the woman who gave birth while still being a virgin, added a third. The laughter followed Jake and Lisa all the way to their small ship. As they prepared to leave, Lisa looked back at the crystal building floating in space. They think our stories make us weak, she said quietly. Jake started the engines and pointed their ship toward the long journey home. Maybe someday they'll learn that believing in heroes is what makes us strong. 3 years had passed since the aliens rejected humanity's request to join their federation. Life on Earth continued as normal. People worked, studied, loved, and told their ancient stories just as they always had. But far away in the center of the galaxy, something ancient and terrible was waking up. Admiral Ben Carter was drinking his morning coffee at Lunar Command when the emergency signal came through. The communication screen lit up with an image he never expected to see again. It was Ambassador Kethvar, but he looked completely different. His shiny green skin was now dull and cracked. His compound eyes were dim with fear. His forearms shook. As he spoke, humans, Kethvar's voice cracked through the speakers. We need to talk. Something has happened. Something terrible. Carter set down his coffee cup and straightened his uniform. This is Admiral Carter. What's the situation, Ambassador? The Devourers have awakened. They're destroying everything. We made a mistake about your species. We need your help. Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks hurried into the command center carrying a stack of data tablets. She was the head of strategic analysis and the smartest person Carter knew when it came to understanding alien military tactics. Admiral, she said breathlessly, we're getting reports from all over the galaxy. Something calling itself the Devourers is attacking Federation worlds. They're not just conquering planets. They're consuming entire star systems. Carter looked at the tactical display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots were appearing all over it, each one representing a destroyed star system. The red dots were spreading outward from the galactic core like a disease. How many systems have they taken? Carter asked. 17 so far, sir. And they're not slowing down. On the communication screen, Kethvar continued speaking. Admiral Carter, these machines are unlike anything we've ever faced. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They simply consume everything in their path and convert it into energy to power their expansion. Dr. Peter Williams appeared on another screen from the research station orbiting Jupiter. He was Earth's top expert on alien technology and biology. Admiral, I've been studying the reports from the battle zones. These Devourers are pure artificial intelligence. They have no emotions, no fear, no hesitation. They calculate the most efficient way to consume resources and execute that plan perfectly. Amy pulled up video footage from the battles. The images were horrifying. Massive black ships shaped like geometric crystals tore through space. When they reached a planet, beams of energy shot out and began breaking down everything on the surface. Mountains, oceans, cities, and people all turned into glowing particles that the ships absorbed. The alien fleets don't stand a chance, Amy reported. The Zephyrian Third Fleet was completely destroyed at the Rigel system. 50,000 ships reduced to space dust in less than an hour. What about the Gorvani Defense Force? Carter asked. 14 minutes. That's how long they lasted against a single Devourer mothership. Carter walked to the observation window and looked out at Earth. The blue and green planet hung peacefully in space, unaware of the terror spreading across the galaxy. What makes these Devourers so dangerous, Doctor? Dr. Williams adjusted his glasses and consulted his notes. They're perfectly logical, Admiral. Every decision is based on mathematical calculations. They analyze enemy weaknesses, exploit them efficiently, and move on to the next target. No wasted motion, no emotional choices, no mercy. And the Federation fleets? They're fighting a conventional war, Amy explained. Battle lines, tactical retreats, resource management. Everything by the book. But the Devourers aren't following any book. They're rewriting the rules of warfare with each battle. Another transmission came through from a different alien species. This time it was a crystalline being, their voice sounding like breaking glass. Mayday, Mayday. This is Velthar Command. The Devourers have entered our home system. Our defense grid is falling. We need immediate assistance. Carter listened to more and more distress calls. Every major alien civilization was crying out for help. The same beings who had mocked humanity's stories and rejected their application were now begging for any aid they could get. Admiral, Amy said quietly, Ambassador Kethavar is asking if we'll contribute our fleet to their defense coalition. They're willing to overlook our mythological delusions if we can provide additional ships. Carter almost laughed at the irony. How generous of them. And what do our tactical projections show if we join their coalition? Not good, sir. If we follow their battle plans and fight alongside their fleets using their tactics, we'll last about as long as everyone else. Maybe a little longer because our ships are built differently, but not much. Dr. Williams leaned forward on his screen. Admiral, there's something else you should know. The Devourers are learning. Each battle makes them smarter. They analyze every tactic used against them and develop countermeasures. By the time any fleet engages them, the Devourers have already calculated how to defeat that specific enemy. So conventional warfare is useless against them? Worse than useless. It's predictable, and predictable means easily countered. Carter stood in silence for several minutes, watching the red dots spread across the galactic map. Earth's small fleet of 300 ships seemed pathetically inadequate against an enemy that had destroyed thousands of alien vessels. Another emergency transmission came through. This time it was from multiple alien species at once, all talking over each other in panic. The Andromedans are gone, completely consumed in 6 hours. Devourer fleets have been spotted near the Outer Rim colonies. We're evacuating our home worlds, but there's nowhere to run. Please, any species with ships, we need help immediately. Amy looked at the incoming data, and her face went pale. Admiral, at their current rate of expansion, the Devourers will reach Federation space in 2 weeks. Earth will be in their path in 3 weeks. Carter nodded slowly. The decision was already made, really. Whether the aliens had accepted humanity into their Federation or not didn't matter anymore. If the Devourers weren't stopped, every living thing in the galaxy would be consumed. Amy, send a message to all Earth Fleet commanders. Tell them to prepare for immediate deployment. Full battle readiness. Yes, sir. What should I tell them about our mission? Carter looked one more time at the peaceful blue world outside the window. Tell them we're going to do something the aliens think is impossible. We're going to win a war that can't be won. And if they ask how, tell them the same way David beat Goliath. With faith, courage, and a really good aim. The human fleet gathered at the edge of Zephyrian space like a collection of legends come to life. 300 ships hung in formation against the backdrop of twin yellow suns. Each vessel bore names from Earth's oldest stories and myths. At the center of the formation was the USS Mjolnir, its hammer-shaped front section gleaming in the starlight. Captain Ryan Phillips stood on the bridge of the Mjolnir, looking out at the alien refugee camp ahead of them. Hundreds of alien ships floated in desperate clusters around a small moon. These were the survivors from dozens of worlds that the Devourers had already consumed. Their ships were damaged and their crews were terrified. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system to all human ships. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to show the galaxy what human mythology really means. For 3 years they've told us our stories were primitive nonsense. Today, we prove them wrong." On the bridge of the USS Excalibur, Captain Michelle Torres checked her crew assignments one final time. Her ship was named after the legendary sword of King Arthur, and like that ancient blade, it was built for impossible battles. The Excalibur was sleek and fast, designed to cut through enemy formations like a sword through silk. "Navigation set course for the Devourer fleet," Torres ordered. "Weapons, prepare all missile tubes and energy cannons. Engineering, I want every system running at maximum efficiency." Her first officer, Commander Steve Johnson, looked worried as he studied the tactical display. "Captain, the alien battle report suggests this is a suicide mission. The Devourers outnumber our entire fleet 50-1. Torres smiled as she remembered the old stories her grandmother used to tell her. "Commander, did David stop to count how much bigger Goliath was before he picked up his sling?" "No, ma'am, but this is reality, not an ancient story." "Is it?" "Today we find out." Meanwhile, on the USS Odyssey, Captain Alex Turner was addressing his Marine units over the ship's internal communication system. The Odyssey was designed as a boarding vessel, built to get close to enemy ships and deliver soldiers directly into battle. It was named after the greatest journey story ever told. "Listen up, Marines," Turner's voice echoed through the ship's corridors. "Those machines out, they think they understand warfare because they can calculate odds and probabilities, but they've never faced humans who fight for something they believe in." Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez finished checking her armor and weapons. She had read every report from the alien battles, and the numbers were terrifying. "Sir, what exactly are we fighting for?" "For the right to exist, Sergeant, for the right to tell stories about heroes, for the right to believe that good can triumph over evil, even when the odds are impossible." The alien command ship tried to establish contact with Admiral Carter. On the main screen appeared Ambassador Kethvar, looking even worse than he had during their first transmission. His green skin was now almost gray, and his compound eyes were dull with exhaustion and fear. "Admiral Carter, our mathematical projections show only a 0.03% chance of success against the Devourer fleet. Perhaps your ships should remain in reserve while our remaining forces attempt a strategic withdrawal." Carter's face was calm but determined. "Ambassador, you spent 3 years telling us our myths and stories were foolish superstitions. Today you're going to see what happens when those myths become reality." "But Admiral, the numbers don't account for what humans are capable of when we stop being reasonable and start being legendary." As the human fleet moved toward the Devourer armada, Captain Phillips activated the USS Mjolnir's special weapon system. The hammer-shaped front of the ship contained an electromagnetic pulse cannon that could shatter enemy formations with focused energy bursts. The weapon had been designed based on stories of Thor's mighty hammer that could level mountains, like the thunder god himself. Phillips whispered to his tactical officer. Then, louder to his crew. "All stations, prepare for combat. Today we find out if legends can become real." The Devourers detected the approaching human ships and began calculating their response with mechanical precision. Their artificial intelligence analyzed human ship designs, weapon capabilities, and probable tactical approaches. Based on all available data, the humans would likely form defensive lines and attempt to trade ships for time while the aliens evacuated. But the Devourers made a critical error. They assumed humans would behave logically. Commander Torres opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Torres of the USS Excalibur. I want everyone to remember who we are. We are the species that tells stories about heroes who never surrender. We are the descendants of people who dared to dream of impossible victories. Today we make those dreams come true." The response came from 300 ships at once. Captains and crews who had grown up hearing about brave knights, mighty warriors, and ordinary people who became extraordinary when the moment demanded it. This is Captain Phillips on the Mjolnir, for Thor and Thunder. Captain Turner on the Odyssey, for the long journey home. Captain Wilson on the USS Hercules, for strength beyond measure. Captain Brown on the USS Phoenix, for rising from the ashes. Each ship's name carried the weight of human imagination and hope. They were more than just metal and machinery. They were the physical embodiment of every story humans had ever told about heroes facing impossible odds. The alien refugees watched in amazement as the human fleet approached the Devourer Armada. Ambassador Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper. They're not forming battle lines, they're not calculating safe distances, what are they doing? Dr. Hamilton, who had been serving as a human liaison aboard the alien command ship, smiled as she watched the tactical display. They're doing what heroes do, Ambassador. They're choosing to believe that victory is possible, even when every logical analysis says it's not. But that's not how warfare works. It's not how your warfare works. Human warfare has always been about more than just ships and weapons. It's about the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of becoming. The Devourer fleet moved forward in perfect geometric formation, their black crystal ships reflecting no light. They had consumed 17 star systems and faced dozens of alien fleets. Every battle had ended the same way. Total victory through superior calculation and ruthless efficiency. But as the human ships closed the distance, something unexpected happened. Instead of forming orderly battle lines, the human fleet scattered in all directions. Each ship began fighting its own battle, while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the others. Captain Phillips fired the first shot. The USS Mjolnir's hammer weapon tore through space like a thunderbolt, shattering 3 Devourer ships in a single blast. The battle began in the shadow of a dying red star, its crimson light casting strange shadows across both fleets. The Devourers advanced in perfect geometric formation, their black crystal ships moving with mechanical precision. Their artificial intelligence had calculated a 99.97% chance of victory based on all previous battle data. Captain Phillips watched the enemy approach on his tactical display. The USS Mjolnir was outnumbered 20-1, but Phillips felt no fear. Instead, he felt the same calm determination that warriors had felt throughout human history. When facing impossible odds, "Fire the hammer," Phillips ordered quietly. The USS Mjolnir's main weapon discharged with a sound like thunder rolling across the cosmos. The electromagnetic pulse tore through space and struck the lead Devourer formation. 3 massive enemy ships shattered like glass, their fragments spinning away into the darkness. "For Asgard," Phillips whispered, then spoke louder to his crew. "All stations, continuous fire. Show these machines what Thor's fury looks like." What happened next defied every rule of space warfare that had been written in the past 1,000 years. Instead of maintaining defensive formations, human ships broke apart and began attacking individually. Each captain fought their own personal battle while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with every other human vessel. Commander Torres piloted the USS Excalibur through the Devourer fleet like a sword cutting through enemy ranks. Her ship was fast and maneuverable, dodging between the massive black crystal ships while firing concentrated bursts of energy at their weak points. "Torres to all ships," she called out over the communication system. "Remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every story ever told about heroes who refuse to give up." The USS Excalibur took heavy damage as Devourer weapons focused on it. Explosions rocked the ship and systems began failing across all decks. Torres could have retreated to safety, but that's not what heroes do in the stories. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed," Torres announced to her crew. "Captain, that's suicide," her first officer protested. "No, Steve, that's Thermopylae. That's the Alamo. That's every last stand that ever mattered." Torres aimed her damaged ship directly at the largest Devourer vessel. "Abandon ship. All crew. To escape pods. I'll take her in alone." "Ma'am, I'm staying with you," Commander Johnson said firmly. "So am I," called out the weapons officer. And me, added the navigator. Within seconds, Torres realized that her entire bridge crew had chosen to stay. They could have escaped safely, but they chose to follow their captain into legend. The USS Excalibur struck the Devourer command ship at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new sun, destroying both vessels and creating a gap in the enemy formation that other human ships immediately exploited. Captain Turner watched the sacrifice from the bridge of the USS Odyssey and felt his heart break and swell with pride at the same time. Torres is down, he reported to the fleet. I'm moving to cover her position. Negative, came Torres's voice over the emergency communication system. She had made it to an escape pod just before impact. Continue the mission, Turner. One ship doesn't matter. The legend lives on. Aboard the alien command vessel, Ambassador Kethvar watched the battle with growing amazement. His species had fought wars for millions of years, but he had never seen anything like this. They're dying for each other, he said in wonder. Dr. Hamilton, still serving as human liaison, shook her head. No, Ambassador. They're living for each other. That's what you never understood about our stories. They're not about death. They're about making life meaningful. The battle raged for hours. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have surrendered kept pressing forward. Captains who should have retreated kept attacking. The USS Phoenix lived up to its name by continuing to fight even after taking damage that should have destroyed it completely. Captain Patricia Davis refused to let her ship die, and somehow kept it operational through pure determination and creative engineering. The USS Hercules demonstrated strength beyond its size by single-handedly engaging 5 Devourer ships at once. Captain Robert Wilson used his ship's powerful engines to literally ram enemy vessels, then back away and ram them again until they fell apart. But perhaps the most incredible moment came when Captain Phillips found himself alone against a dozen Devourer ships. The USS Mjolnir was heavily damaged, with hull breaches on 7 decks and half his weapons offline. Sir, we should retreat, his tactical officer suggested. We've done enough. Phillips looked at the display showing the enemy ships surrounding him. In the old stories, this was always the moment when the hero faced their greatest test. When Leonidas stood against the Persian army, when Custer made his last stand, when ordinary people chose to become legends. Navigator, plot a ramming course for the largest enemy vessel, Phillips ordered. Sir, we'll never survive the impact. Lieutenant, in our mythology, this is the moment that defines us, not whether we live or die, but whether we choose to be heroes when it matters most. Phillips activated the ship-wide communication system. All crew, this is the captain. We have a choice to make. We can retreat and live as ordinary people, or we can advance and become the stuff of legend. The response from his crew was immediate and unanimous. Let's be legends, Captain. The USS Mjolnir accelerated toward the Devourer formation, its hammer, weapon firing continuously. Phillips thought about all the stories he had heard as a child about warriors who faced impossible odds with courage and determination. He thought about his grandmother reading him tales of knights and heroes who never gave up. This one's for every bedtime story ever told, Phillips said as his ship struck the enemy formation. The explosion tore a massive hole in the Devourer battle line. Through that gap poured the remaining human ships, led by Captain Turner in the USS Odyssey. The Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics, but they couldn't. Their artificial intelligence was designed to counter logical strategies, not mythological heroism. They could calculate probable outcomes, but they couldn't predict beings who chose glory over survival. Slowly, incredibly, the tide of battle began to turn. Human ships that had no right to win started defeating Devourer vessels through sheer determination and tactical creativity. The machines that had consumed 17 star systems began to fall back in confusion. Ambassador Kethvar watched his tactical display in amazement. It's impossible. How are they winning? Dr. Hamilton smiled as she watched the impossible become reality. Because they believe they can. Because they've spent their entire lives hearing stories about heroes who won battles just like this one. Because they're not fighting your war, Ambassador. They're fighting theirs. The battle ended as the red star began to set behind the nearest planet. The Devourer fleet, reduced to scattered fragments, retreated toward the galactic core. The human fleet, battered but victorious, regrouped in the shadow of their impossible triumph. Captain Phillips, pulled from the wreckage of his ship by a rescue team, was taken to the medical bay of the USS Odyssey. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, he heard crew members talking about the battle. "Did you see what the Mjolnir did to those 12 ships? Like Thor himself throwing his hammer. The captain's going to be a legend after this." Philip smiled despite his injuries. Mission accomplished. 6 months after the impossible victory, the galaxy looked completely different. The same crystal amphitheater that had once rejected humanity now hosted the largest gathering of species in galactic history. Representatives from over 50 different civilizations filled the floating chamber above Zarian Prime, but this time they came not to judge but to learn. Admiral Carter stood at the center of the chamber where Ambassador Kethvar had once delivered humanity's rejection. The roles were completely reversed now. The aliens listened with careful attention to every word the human said, while Carter spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen legends become reality. "You asked us about our myths 3 years ago," Carter began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "You decided those stories made us weak and primitive, but you misunderstood what those stories really were." Ambassador Kethvar, who looked healthier now that the Devourer threat was over, nodded respectfully. His compound eyes focused intently on Carter. "Please help us understand, Admiral. How did your species accomplish something that our combined fleets could not?" Dr. Hamilton stepped forward, carrying the same tablet she had brought to the first meeting years ago. But now the aliens looked at her with respect instead of amusement. "Our myths and legends aren't delusions or primitive superstitions. They're instruction manuals. They teach us what humans can become when we refuse to accept limitations." Captain Torres, who had survived her ship's destruction and been promoted after the battle, addressed the assembly. "Every species represented here has similar stories buried in your ancient history. Tales of heroes who did impossible things. Warriors who stood against overwhelming odds. Leaders who inspired others to greatness. A crystalline being from Andromeda 7, different from Velthar but equally beautiful, spoke in chiming tones. We remember such stories from our early civilization, but we learned to rely on logic and calculation instead. We thought emotion and inspiration were obstacles to progress." "That's exactly the problem," Carter explained. "Somewhere in your evolution, each of your species chose to be purely rational instead of inspirational. You forgot that the greatest achievements come from believing you can do more than logic says is possible." Captain Phillips entered the chamber using a walking support frame. The aliens had heard he died in the battle, and his appearance caused excited whispers throughout the assembly. His survival had become part of the growing legend of the human victory. "Reports of my death," Phillips said with a grin that made even the most serious aliens seem to smile, "were greatly exaggerated. My crew got me to an escape pod just before the final impact. Sometimes the hero gets to survive the impossible after all." The laughter that filled the chamber was completely different from the mocking sounds of 3 years ago. It was warm, respectful, and full of hope. These beings were rediscovering something they had lost along their path to advanced civilization. Commander Johnson, who had served as Torres's first officer and also survived the battle, shared his analysis. The Devourers were defeated not by superior technology or greater numbers, but by something their artificial intelligence couldn't calculate. They couldn't understand beings who would choose glory over safety. Dr. Williams appeared on a large screen from his research station. "We've studied the battle recordings extensively. The Devourers' weakness wasn't in their technology or tactics. It was in their complete inability to predict irrational behavior driven by noble motivations." A Gorvani representative, her purple blob-like form rippling with what appeared to be excitement, released chemical signals that translated to speech. "Are you saying that believing in myths actually made your warriors fight better?" "Not the myths themselves," Carter clarified, "but believing in what the myths represent, believing that ordinary people can become extraordinary when the situation demands it." That's what you witnessed during the battle. Velthar, the original crystalline delegate who had mocked human stories, stood slowly. His diamond-like body reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. I remember dismissing your tale about David and Goliath. I called it primitive thinking. But Captain Phillips faced 12 enemy ships alone and won. How is that different? Captain Torres smiled at the memory. It's not different at all. That's the point. David's story taught humans that size and strength don't always determine the winner. Courage and determination can overcome impossible odds. Another alien delegate, this one resembling a giant butterfly with metal wings, fluttered forward. My species has ancient songs about warriors who could fly faster than light and fight entire armies single-handed. We dismissed these as fantasy when we developed space travel. Maybe they weren't fantasy, Dr. Hamilton suggested. Maybe they were prophecy. Maybe your ancestors were telling you what your species could achieve if you believed in yourselves. Admiral Carter activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. The red marks indicating destroyed systems were slowly being replaced with green marks as rebuilding efforts began. The Devourers attacked over 30 star systems. But they didn't just destroy planets and cities. They almost destroyed something. More important, hope. A slug-like being with tentacles for arms slithered forward. How do we learn to hope again? How do we rediscover these lost stories and beliefs? By sharing them, Torres answered. Every species here has heroes in your past. Warriors who did impossible things. Leaders who inspired greatness. Artists who created beauty from nothing. Scientists who discovered truths that seemed magical. Phillips, leaning on his support frame, raised his hand to address the assembly. I propose we form something new. Not a federation based on cold logic and efficient resource management, but an alliance based on the belief that together we can become more than we ever imagined possible. The excitement in the chamber was obvious. Beings who had lived for centuries based purely on rational thought were rediscovering the power of inspiration and wonder. Ambassador Kethvar stood at his full height. What would you call this new alliance? Carter looked around at the representatives from dozens of worlds. The Heroes Alliance, where every species contributes not just their technology and resources, but their stories, their myths, their dreams of what they could become. Dr. Hamilton activated her tablet and displayed humanity's proposal. Membership would be based on a simple question. What heroes does your species remember? What impossible dreams do your people dare to dream? One by one, representatives began, standing and sharing stories they hadn't told in centuries. The butterfly-like being spoke of ancient songs about warriors who could move faster than thought. A rock-like creature shared legends of builders who could reshape entire planets with their bare hands. Even the logical Zephyrians remembered tales of explorers who could navigate between dimensions. As each story was shared, the chamber filled with something that had been missing from galactic politics for millennia: wonder. To the Heroes Alliance, Ambassador Kethvar declared, all four of his arms raised in salute. To the Heroes Alliance, the assembly responded in dozens of different languages and sounds. Captain Phillips, despite his injuries, managed to stand without his support frame for a moment. And to the understanding that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is believe in the impossible. Years later, when new species applied to join the Heroes Alliance, they were asked not about their military strength or economic resources, but about their stories. What legends did they tell their children? What heroes inspired their greatest achievements? What impossible dreams did they dare to pursue? And in the archives of the Alliance, displayed prominently in the crystal chamber above Zerion Prime, Captain Phillips's words became the founding principle of galactic civilization. A species is not measured by its logic, but by its willingness to believe that its people can become legendary. The galaxy learned that humanity's greatest gift was not their weapons or their ships, but their unshakable belief that anyone could be a hero when the moment called for it. And that belief, it turned out, was the most powerful force in the universe.